All right, welcome back everyone to the Partnership Mastermind Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Daniela Mallarino, Senior Manager of Technology Partnerships at Brex, calling in from New York. Daniela has built her career at the intersection of partnerships, integration, ecosystems, and go-to-market strategy with rich experience across AI, access control, security tech, and now Fintech. At Brex, she's focused on technology partnerships and embedded partnership opportunities, helping shape how Brex shows up across the software and workflows modern businesses rely on. In today's episode, we're going to dig deep into her career journey, what makes great technology partnerships actually work, how partnerships are evolving in Fintech, and what partner leaders can learn from the way Daniela thinks about ecosystems, execution, and customer experience. Daniela, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Amazing. Cool. Well, look, I met you late 2025. You my socks off on the first touch point. You just struck me as someone who just wants to be the best, wants to make the biggest impact for your company, for your customers, for the ecosystems you work in. So I'm thrilled to have you on the show. I think you have a lot to offer our audience. We warm up our guests, right, to get the juices flowing with what we call our quick hitting 5 rapid questions. So these are just light, some professional oriented, some personal oriented. Just let the shoulders relax a bit, let our audience get a glimpse into who you are as a person, and then we'll get into our fun stuff. You cool with that?
Let's do it. Let's rapid fire.
All right, let's go. So first one is our origin snapshot. So one word, or a couple words I'll give you, but a couple words to describe Bogota, and which languages do you speak?
Awesome. Well, for those of you that don't know, Bogota is the capital of Colombia, which is quite frankly the center of the world, right at the Ecuador mountain city. But one word to describe it, I would say chaotic.
Okay.
Certainly chaotic. 10 million people or more living there. So I think it taught me a thing or two about what partnerships could look like. And as far as languages, I speak English, Spanish, and French, although I can get by with Italian. Just don't ask me too much, but I do love pasta, so I can certainly order at a restaurant.
Amazing. Well, she's a fantastic coach. If you're looking, just before this, she was coaching you on how to pronounce her last name correctly. And she was going to let me get by with this like lazy American way. So she's a very thoughtful, patient coach. Cool. All right. Second one for you. First partnership win. So what was the first integration you were part of shipping that made you think, you know what? I just love this. I want to do a lot more of this.
That's a really good question. I honestly think the first one, at least the one that I can recall right now, was with a video company called Spot AI at my previous role in access control and physical security. And the reason why that integration inspired me to continue working in partnerships, specifically technology partnerships, is because when you really think about it, unless you're a founder or you own your own sort of startup or company, very few times in life you get to see something go from 0 to 1 at a micro level that actually impacts a business. And this was an integration that came from, very early on, sort of like inbound at a company, at a conference, to really just becoming an integration that customers were using and were seeing value in. So just being able to see that full life cycle of, hey, I think this could be an interesting partnership, to someone actually using it and seeing an improvement in their day-to-day was really inspiring.
I love that. And thanks for sharing that. I grew up in tech partnerships as well. And I had the similar moment where I was like, wait, like we get to like ship things that directly impacts our product that our customers actually use, which increases our ability to sell in market, our ability to retain our existing customer base. Like it felt almost too good to be true. And another thing we'll talk about later in this episode is, like, yes, commercial impact is like table stakes in terms of like being in partnerships, but like if you can impact both, even in the AI era, there's like plenty of room for you to coexist within your company. So I think just being able to impact both product and therefore customer on top of the commercial unlock, I think just makes it like the coolest job in partnerships.
Fully agree.
I guess I'm biased.
Cool. Well, I didn't get the bias. Where?
Yeah. Okay, third quick hitting question for you. Let's talk about tech you can't live without. You can give us a couple tools if you'd like, but like, you're obviously like tech forward, seem to be an early adopter, so to speak. I'm sure you're leaning into AI. So like, what tool or tools / apps are you just like using more than anything else right now to power your life and be productive?
So honestly, right now I'm fully in the AI bubble, using a lot of tools that have significantly improved the way that I see my work and that I use my time. Of course, Claude. Claude has been really great. And by the way, I'll name them, but no sponsorships here. But of course, Claude has been amazing. Granola for note-taking has been really good too. A platform called Superhuman has also been really helpful for email conversations. But I will say I'm still kind of old school in that spreadsheets and the CRM and a notebook will still be my favorite tools. And in part because when you overlay these AI platforms into that, you really want to make sure that your data is accurate. So yes, I am full on board with the AI train, but I would still say that a tool that I can't live without is Excel.
I mean, that is my love language because, I mean, if you could see my browser right now, you would see a ocean of Google spreadsheet tabs open right now. And I love the way you said, like, layering on AI. So I've always been using Google Sheets. To be honest, I wasn't always, like, the most adept at, like, VLOOKUP formulas and building these crazy complex, like, formulas and dashboards. But now with AI, I can. Like, I can go into Claude, I can tell it exactly what I need, and then I can download a CSV from it and import it straight into Google Spreadsheets, and then voila, look at that. I'm an advanced
It's truly wonderful
spreadsheet user. So, shout out to the people using the OG tools out there, right?
Shout out.
Cool. All right. Second last one for you here is inspiration outside of tech, right? So we obviously learned so much about the partnership profession within the confines of the tech landscape that we all work within. But I personally draw a lot of inspiration outside of tech. You already kind of hinted at one even from your time growing at Columbia. But so what's one non-software tech industry that has given you the most surprising partnership ideas?
There's a few. We can go more in depth with some of these later on in the podcast. I would say the airline/travel industry is one that always inspires me just because of the amount of touch points that they have to have with a customer and how much of that experience is owned by different stakeholders. Another one that I really look for a lot as well is like retail and hospitality. And by retail, I also mean like e-commerce. So industries that are very much ingrained into what we do day to day as human beings. And quickly, the reason why I like these industries is because I think once you are used to a certain level of technology or a certain level of user experience in your day-to-day, like how you sign into a streaming platform or how you receive packages, you start expecting that same level of experience across the entire ecosystem that you use. And so seeing these industries, the ones that are leading the change of like, this is how the experience is going to go and we're going to challenge it and we're going to make it even better. And surprisingly, if you really look into it, it's all partnerships. Maybe not tech partnerships, but it's all agreements across B2Bs trying to deliver a better service for someone. So when you dissect what that looks like and then you replicate it into your work, that's when you start looking at excellence and looking at, where the industries or where our general technology ecosystem is going.
I mean, that is just absolutely beautiful. I know any of our tech partner geeks and integration experts out there, they're absolutely loving everything you just said. And I too, I am fascinated by a lot of industries, like even automotive, like when Tesla and Ford did this deal where you can have a Ford electric vehicle, but you can plug into Tesla charging stations. Like that is like partnerships nirvana to me, because it's like it's such a win-win. And I can't remember the exact phrase, we'll get into it later, but like borrowing something from each side. You have that phrase, we'll talk about that in a second. I love that. But the other thing you said is just like, I'm obsessed with consumer applications where integrations show up in consumer applications. And if anyone listening right now is like, what do you even mean? It's like, do you love being able to just log into every tool on earth with Gmail, right? Well, guess what? Like that's an integration, right? Between
literally
Google and every other app on earth, right? So like, I just love huge convenience unlocks powered by integrations. So is that kind of what you're getting at?
Oh, fully agree. I mean, to your point, last night I was trying to watch the Knicks game at home. I was like, I don't have an ESPN account. I'm on the projector at home. I simply scan a QR code, open it on my phone, give them my money, and in 2 seconds it refreshes, and then I have the Knicks game up. Go Knicks, by the way. And this level of experience where in literally under 3 minutes I can get what I want. Sure, we could go into the details of what this means for us not being bored and expecting instant gratification as a society. But the fact that I can get what I paid for in a matter of seconds really is something that I also am going to start expecting from what I do at work and from when I start interacting with other platforms and other companies.
Yes, it's a super smart comment. And I think it's amazing to be in tech like we are and be a part of the evolution. I think it's also challenging to be in tech as an employee or certainly as a C-suite to think, oh shit, like consumer expectations are evolving to, you know, what Daniela just described. It's like, shit, like we got to provide that experience at a minimum or we aren't even competing anymore. Right.
That's
So
exactly
I personally,
it.
I don't know if since you've been in tech, I get so frustrated now. My wife, she's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, this is so inconvenient. It took 17 seconds. It should have only taken 4. Right. Like I get so,
Yeah.
I got to get off my high horse, but I get inconvenienced. And then I'm like, that should be solved by some integration or something you just described with the ESPN QR code.
Oh,
So
I
I'm definitely
fully
getting
agree.
more frustrated.
And I'm giving away my relentless optimistic personality, but I wouldn't say it's inconvenience. I think it's just you expect better, and that's where business opportunity is too, where it's like, well, it can be better. How about we figure out how to make it better? So it's like, if one industry could figure it out, why can't we, right? So it's more like this little bit of FOMO of like, it's inconvenient, but let's figure out where this can actually be a business opportunity.
I love that. I think that's a good segue into future conversations today. But the last quick hitting question we ask all our guests, this is about hidden talent. What's a hobby or passion outside of work that our listeners wouldn't expect about Daniela?
I'm gonna get weird. I don't know if they wouldn't expect it, but I do love birds. So I'm a bird watcher or a birder. And what that means is that I chase Pokemons, but in real life with binoculars. So that would be my hobby. If you're into that world, you start tracking that as well. So there's a thing called a life list, which is how many species you've identified since you became a nerd or a self-declared nerd. And right now I'm at like 500. So I'm way deep in it. Wow. Yeah.
There's so many layers, like an onion to you. This is fascinating. I would be remiss if I didn't ask, what's the most exotic or rare, like, you know, you're, you know, finding in Pokemon land, like finding Mewtwo, so to speak. Like, what's your equivalent of that?
Oh man, I would say it changes, and every time you see a new species, or even if you see the same species twice, the moment and that interaction is always different. But there's this bird called the roseate spoonbill, which I really like. You guys should definitely Google it. It's this like pink bird with a massive bill, and they basically waddle in the water to move the sand and eat, which I find fascinating. So when I saw that one for the first time, I felt like my 8-year-old self was just jumping inside of me. Yeah.
Wow, that you definitely lived up to something we wouldn't expect. So that's great. So now we're gonna get.
That's my superpower.
Yeah, now we have 3 sections, 3 segments for this episode. We're gonna get into segment 1, which is all about your origin story and early lessons. And so I want to start with your academic roots, all the way to AI startup. So I would love if you could just discuss your transition from academia and research to a Toronto AI startup. You know, what drew you to tech and eventually partnerships?
Yeah, so I lived in Toronto for about 5 to 6 years. So that's essentially where my academic career started, where my career in tech started. And the program that I did in school was very academic heavy. It was 5 years and I was meant to produce a thesis. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of like heads down work, writing. And at the time I was really interested in a bit of a sad way, but very interested in online gender-based violence. So I was mostly analyzing platforms and how those present themselves to women and why certain spaces are more open than others. And truthfully, after I finished that program, I was just so tired of all of the academic work, and I felt like I really just wanted to talk to people. So I segued into an very early AI startup called Blue Jay. They actually just raised their Series D, so they're doing very well. But this was way before the AI wave. And I was working closely with accountants and lawyers at the time in the success team. And what I really liked about that job was that there were many things that I could do to add value to an account at a specific time, of course, from the platform. But I also liked the high profile of companies that I was speaking with and the fact that, you know, they were all sort of like serious. So for someone that hadn't done customer facing job, this felt very interesting. And my boss at the time was the one that said, hey, you know, I think you have a good perspective on like long-term strategy as well as immediate execution or like short-term goals, and partnerships seem to be a segue that he encouraged me to explore.
Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that. It's always fascinating to see kind of how people have different on-ramps into partnerships. We all have very, very unique backgrounds. Some of us were chasing birds in the wild. Some of us were spending a lot of our time in a lab, like myself. So then, you know, you say your boss suggested partnerships because of that mix of long-term strategy and immediate execution, which definitely resonates with me. But then you get into it. Like, help us understand, like, what clicked for you, right? Like, what part of that early role time was like, wow, like, this really is something that I can see myself spending a lot of time doing?
I think 2 things were clicking for me at the time. The first one was that after having spent a couple of months and years really at the time in some sort of corporate environment, I started seeing that there was typically a disconnect between leadership and the people doing the work on the ground. If you're in leadership, you have this big vision, big numbers. This is how we're reaching these goals. You typically have, of course, really good energy and you're very motivated. But at times I felt people in those positions forgot to see what it actually took to get there. And at the same time, if you're only executing and your heads are down into I need to hit, these numbers that are very specific at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, you also forget to see what you're doing things for. And partnerships fixes that. We'll get into that. But the other thing that was clicking for me at the time was also, I've always been very entrepreneurial because of my family, mostly my grandma. And I really was interested in understanding what I could learn from companies that could give me the right tools to then eventually launch my own venture. And so when I got into partnerships, I started seeing that it was actually a really good role for doing both. On the one hand, it's if you at some point want to run a business or you want to own a company, partnerships gives you that visibility and skill set to really operate at all levels. And at the same time, it requires you to have both the short-term expectation of I am going to hit this goal while understanding how you're going to scale it and ensure that whatever you're doing is a long-term strategy. So I really like the mix of those two things.
Yeah, I love that. It certainly jives with me. I love the entrepreneurial aspect of partnerships. I think you have to touch all of the major functions within your company: customer success, sales, product, marketing, engineering. You need to be able to cross-function and collaborate really well. You need to be able to context switch in a given day between 10 different meetings that are totally unrelated towards one another. So that definitely jives with me. In our prep, we talked about kind of early mistakes and lessons learned. You had noted that assumptions about tracking and success metrics were made early on. So you had made some assumptions. Describe the situation and how it taught you to over-communicate and set up tracking from day one, which is certainly a hot topic in our communities.
Yeah, I think if at some point anyone in our community just completely figures out the tracking from day one, I will be like, come birding with me, let's just be friends, because that's certainly an ongoing conversation. But for context, my first partnerships role when I started, there was no playbook, there was no guidelines, there was no mentorship or leadership as to what I was supposed to do. It was just this North Star of, hey, we have some partners, we want more partners, and we think that if we put some resources here, we can get to this goal, go figure it out. And while figuring that out, I think I prioritize the immediate activities of, let's do this activation, let's do this enablement, let's do this event, let's do this feature, just really getting things up the ground and running. But what you forget to do when you're so focused on ensuring that you're doing the work is ensuring that you set up tracking from before you did the work. Otherwise, once the work is done, it's really hard to prove that there was nothing before. And I think because of that, I assumed that I was entering a situation where someone had already thought about this. And it's not to blame. Partnerships is very new. I wouldn't be surprised if most of us, even in organizations where partnerships are well established and they're partnerships first, still fail to track things right. So something I would try to do again if I could is just ensure that I get the right metrics. I understand the activities that I'm doing, the inputs that I'm doing, and how they are actually directionally and very directly correlating to the outputs that I'm expecting, and ensure that is something that is considered.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that was true pre-AI era, that being able to track and kind of report on the impact you're having specifically, which I think we can all agree is easier for someone in, say, sales, because there's 0 degrees of separation from their outputs and money hitting the company bank account. I think for partnerships, sometimes our KPIs owned are 1 level, 2 level, 3 levels above close one deals from a KPI perspective. And so we have to track it. And my point is, I think that's especially important now, where if we're just being blunt, companies are trying to hire less, cut team sizing. And so the people who are going to survive and thrive are the people whose impact is undeniable. It's felt. I use that word felt all the time. It's not enough to just, I hit my quota for several quarters in a row. Why is my company cutting me? It's not all impact is created equal. And how good of a job did you articulate and communicate that impact upwards and crossword across the org? Because I promise right now, when companies are reviewing budgets and personnel decisions, if they see the numbers that you're producing, yes, but also your impact is just undeniable, in part because of how you've built up political capital and kind of position yourself, you will be safe. right? So as just a quick comment for you to react to, Daniela, what do you think about not just tracking and then obviously getting good results, but then going the next step and like making sure that you're radiating all of that goodness to all the right people across the org?
Radiating goodness is a good way to put it. Very optimistic, I will say, though. Yeah, I think something that being in a circumstance where I had to radiate that goodness and I had to realize that unless I did it, no one else would, and that doing it directly impacted my ability to stay at the company and do my job. When it hits, you're like, oh, actually, this is really hard. But when you start doing it and you realize how important it is to stand up for yourself and fight for your metrics and really just say, no, I added value here, and here are 5 ways that showed. I think it just forms you into a more resilient professional, and it just gives you this outlook that nothing is granted. Like you have to, like, I don't want to use the word fight, but you really do have to fight for yourself, even when you're an employee or when you're a founder, and prove that your value is leading to something that people care about. And you'd be surprised, in having those conversations when, you're sharing metrics and sharing why something matters or why something didn't do so well. Leadership also responds by telling you, well, this is great, but we're actually focused on this now. And then those moments give you some insight into how to pivot quicker than you normally would. And that could also, keep you in the safety of your job. So just like keeping those communication lines open, things change really quickly. And when you get those signals, being able to say, okay, thank you, I'm going to pivot right now is really good as well.
Yeah, totally. I love the use of the word resilience. I do think that we do need to fight, and I really like the ending there of like, you don't just want to be reporting when things are good. Like, the biggest trust you can unlock is actually when things are not going well, and you're the first person to call it out, right? If you're the last person to call it out, guess what? Your days are numbered. But the opposite is true. And when you're consistently someone who's like, Chris, gotta be honest, numbers, they're not looking good, right? Probably not going to hit this month. There's still a path to hit for the quarter, and let me walk you through my plan, right? Like that
Fully
can really
agree.
build you a ton of credibility.
Fully agree. Okay. And it builds trust and rapport as well between, your manager
Totally.
or leadership and yourself, where when you report something that is not going well, surprisingly in partnerships, it also affects other KPIs that other teams have and just other goals that everyone's involved in. And they start trusting you for that too, because they're like, wait, you have this visibility that we care about and no one else told us. That's important. So to your point earlier, like, outcomes important, revenue is important, like overall sort of like dollars put in the company is important, but also having those connections and that visibility to give this feedback that they might not otherwise have access to is really important.
Totally agree. Of all the people I've ever managed, the times that they came to me proactively when something was wrong earned a lot more respect for me than the times that they produced things that weren't going well. Because sometimes we get lucky and things work, right? But it's like when things don't work, despite trying, and you come to me and have a plan and you want to work together, then that definitely speaks volumes. Alrighty. Last question on this segment before we get into the next one is around habit and kind of curiosity as well. So like fast forward, you're fully ramped now, you have a lot of experience. So like as it stands today, like describe your daily and weekly habits, right? Like how do you stay organized with deals, pipeline review, boring ideas from airlines, credit cards or bookstores based on our prep. Like how do these small habits compound into big results? And like what does your kind of weekly operating cadence look like, as much as you care to share?
Yeah, no, I love that you call them small habits, because really at the end of the day, it's like every single input, every day that you show up, every single meeting that you have, and every single activity that you do is what eventually leads to great outcomes. Again, it's really easy to say, like, we want to hit this number, but when you actually start backtracking and filling in the gaps and putting in the activities that are going to get you there, you realize that it's a lot more about consistency. So generally speaking, I try to keep the CRM as a source of truth for tracking revenue attribution, team involvement, progress, pipeline, as much information as I can rely on from the CRM and as much as visibility as that can give me. That's definitely going to be a great idea, I would argue. But besides that, of course, you have to make sure that you have open communication lines with partners, generally speaking. So keep track of those, but also make sure that you're making things as easy as possible when you're showing up on the day-to-day. I would say those two things are main daily habits of how I show up to work. Sounds simple, but seriously, CRM and just keep your communication channels open with all of your partners. And then as far as inspiration or how do I stay up to date, I read a lot. I like books, and could be nonfiction, but also fiction. I think there's a lot to be learned from storytelling and from how we share stories with each other. So I always like to just be more creative on that side of things and make sure that I'm not forgetting that storytelling is really what makes us human. But also, yeah, from other industries, and I don't like deep dive necessarily on like reports, but I'm just very perceptive, and I try to observe. Like when I'm traveling, I travel a lot, and something that was surprising recently was just like a ride-sharing platform partnered with a loyalty platform for hotels. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense. Like you're riding in a car to get to your hotel. Makes sense that that ride would count towards your stay or your loyalty status there. So just I'm being very perceptive of how these companies are now starting to realize that they need to work together. Otherwise, we're all siloed in a different world, kind of like fighting for people's times instead of just like, how about we all work together for something? So I would say just staying curious, staying observant, and being perceptive to changes in the spaces that I'm in has been really helpful as a daily habit.
Yeah, just again, beautifully stated. I love the use of the word being perceptive, being aware, and just kind of being curious. I think that's, you can definitely like train that muscle. I do think a lot of that is kind of built into our DNA, but I do think there are a lot of things you can intentionally do to put yourself in environments where you are, becoming more curious. And I think that's especially important in tech. And that's a nice segue into the next segment, which is on integrations and kind of open ecosystems. Now, you've made it clear you love integrations, and I love that because I also do as well. And you believe in our prep, you're telling me you believe, part of the reason you love it is because, you believe two companies can borrow the best of each other. That was the phrase. You believe, borrow the best of each other to add net new value. So I'm just curious, like, help us understand, where does that fascination come from, and what do you mean by borrow the best of each other to add new value?
Yeah. I would say, this comes from many systems that we interact with, including like nature. Like if you go into nature and how animals interact with each other, you literally realize that some of them are able to be dependent on each other, and it's actually a positive relationship. I forget the actual names, but there's this like whale that develops like just like weird like weird mass on their bodies, and then there's fish that eat that, which relieves the whale from that, and then it feeds the fish. So obviously this is like very geek definition, but I think that this idea of collaboration between systems, this idea of openness between the best of two platforms comes from many areas of our life. In general though, and like from a strict business perspective, the fascination for an open ecosystem and for integrations is because no platform in software or AI or any technology really that we interact with can do it all perfectly. Unless you have unlimited resources and unlimited talent, which I think maybe only one or two companies might at this point, you cannot do everything perfectly. So I love the idea of like, well, we can do this one thing very, very well, and then this company over here can do this other one thing very, very well, and we actually need each other. Why don't we just partner, collaborate, and build something in the interest of whoever is using it? Like, yes, of course, in partnerships, companies benefit from each other, but I think it's just always trying to think about the customer first. And that's what fascinates me about integrations and open ecosystems, is that the customer experience is always at the center of it, and the value that you can deliver by partnering is always a priority as to why you would do something. And this is true across many teams. Like, nobody will tell you that they are happy with building an integration that nobody uses. Even engineers will be sad about that. So I'm sad about it from the commercial perspective. Engineers are sad about it because they spend time building something that nobody will use. Marketing is sad about it because they can't do events and host activations with it. So really, when you just pick the best of two worlds and then you think about the customer experience, you are delivering a value that you wouldn't otherwise be able to create.
Yeah, love that, and that totally resonates with me. And you're right that all of these stakeholders are, deeply disappointed, so to speak. Which means you've picked a good integration to go after. Sometimes it always doesn't work out. I think one of the mistakes, candidly, I was making early on in my career as like a entry-level tech partner manager was I wasn't starting with the customer, right? I was actually starting with the commercial opportunity. I'm like, I grew up in the Shopify ecosystem, so it's like, okay, I see Klaviyo over there. They're like the Jupiter in our solar system for the astronomy nerds. It's like they're the biggest player on the block. They've got all the customers. I'm sure if we squint hard enough, we can conceptually conceive of these integration use cases between our platforms. Let's go ahead and like deploy all these resources to build it out. And in a lot of my first bets, I just got to be honest, like some were hits, some were misses, and it's because we weren't anchored around where's the real unlock? Like, where's the 1 + 1 = 10? Not forget 1 + 1 = 3. Right? Like, that's so 2020. But like, where's the 1 + 1 = 10? Where it's like if a customer sees this thing, they're like, I need that. Like, I need me some of that. I'm going to gobble it up because it's going to completely unlock some workflow that I couldn't do before, or open up some new use case potential that we never had access to before. So as a double click on this question before we move on, just how important it is in your opinion, especially now with the standards going up as they are, to like really anchor around the customer and understanding what is really going to behoove them to deploy precious IT resources and human resources to not just install this, but to power it, to use it, to understand how if it's working or not. Like, where is the bar now, and how do you think about working backwards from the customer to figure out which bets to place and which ones to put on the side?
That's a great question. I think it's way beyond thinking about the customer now. The bar now is at personalization. Because with AI, you can do so much in terms of collecting data and you're sending emails at scale with like very specific traits of each specific user and each specific company. I think now the bar for keeping the customer top of mind is how personal can you get with them? And I don't mean personal in like how much can you know about them, but just like how targeted and how personalized can you offer a service so that someone buys it for them because it works with their current tech stack. That's the standard we're talking about. So if you're only starting to think like, oh, we should care about the customer, then you're already like a decade or more behind. I think now the standard is, with AI, is just even more, the bar is just so much higher now.
Yeah, totally. And it's hard to have the telemetry to understand how is our customers' companies evolving in the market and almost anticipating what they're going to need in the future as much as you need to anticipate what they need and understand what they need right now. So it's definitely no small feat. I think the more data you can have on your customer, not in a weird, creepy way where you're like selling that data, but like the more real data you can understand, the more you can understand the dynamics of your business, the better, right? Like, you're now at Brex, which is fortunate to have a ton of relevant data that can help you understand kind of how your customer base and market is evolving, which is I'm sure really helpful.
Fully agree. And to go back quickly to your point earlier on just generally like the importance of integrations, Chris, I also have been saying this for a couple of years now, and I think it still remains somewhat true, but I think that when you are a consumer or you're a company and you buy a platform or you buy a product, you're not going to use more than like 20% of it total. Like, if you think about the way you interact with your iPhone, like, it has so many opportunities for like the chips and the apps and the photos, but you really probably only use like a handful of apps. And this is really where integrations also enhance the value of any given service or product to the customer, where you don't have to use the whole thing for it to be valuable, but you can pick what you actually care and what you actually need. And that ability to decide, well, I want this platform and I don't care about this 100 features, but I care about these 2. Can you integrate with that? And if the answer is yes, then that immediately gives your platform or your service a value that on its own just wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I often think about certain integrations as like a net new feature, like especially if you build it on your side of the house and you kind of control the code base and et cetera, like it really is an extension of your product if done correctly, so to speak, which creates more customer value, more marketing kind of opportunities, and certainly on the sales side. And as like a quick FYI, one of the best tips that I can give that always worked for us is like, you know, one of the easiest ways to figure out if there's a good integration candidate is if your sales team is doing a good job, which honestly not enough of them do, of like close loss reason cataloging in your CRM, right? And like drill down to like the very specific integration. You should be able to say something akin to, you know, hey, VP of product and engineering, and, you know, sales leadership, last quarter we had $375,000 of deal pipeline go to close loss, where specifically this particular integration use case was cited.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not just like a one size fits all, like, oh, great, let's go build this now. But it should help you move along.
Fully agree.
We won't go too deep here, but, you know, recent news, you know, you've joined Brex in the last 5 to 6 months as of this recording in mid 2026, which is a huge move. Obviously, Brex is investing heavily into their partner ecosystem. So I'm just curious, the only question we're going to dive into, because we know you can only share so much, is just tell us why Brex, right? Like, obviously someone super talented like yourself, You could go into any different industry vertical, any different company, and they'd be thrilled to have you. So the only question we'll ask on this one is like, why did Brex seem like a right fit, and what are you most excited about in joining Brex?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that I'm still as excited to be part of Brex as when I was not part of Brex. So that's great news personally. But a couple of things definitely attracted me to the company. One was their partnerships first thinking in the ecosystem and just generally in their product. And that is something that I continue to see as I work there in operations and just generally work with my partners day to day. Having come from a company that didn't necessarily say they were partnerships forward, it's made a very big difference just on how I approach my work, how creative I'm able to be, how much I can dream big about what I'm doing. And I think that's really important. And fintech in general, it's a very partnerships-oriented industry as well. So I'm just happy to know that Brex is at the forefront of that. And the second one would be the team and the people that I was working with. I think that for me, I had been in a sort of like my own little island, just heading a department on my own and sort of like pushing from different teams, different departments at once. And I really wanted to be part of a team of other people that were doing the same so that we could borrow ideas from each other. So even if they're handling different types of partnerships or just different types of agreements or products, just like what's working for you, what are you seeing, what's not working. And I think that those two things were a big pull for me to want to join Brex.
Amazing. We'll have to share this with the people in HR team over at Brex so they can see that, just how excited you are. But one thing that you said there that really stood out to me, certainly as someone who's trying to build a business myself, which is like, provides effectively an environment where it allows you to dream big, right? Like that to me was one of the big standout elements there, because that's what you want. Like you want people to feel like there is no ceiling, right? When I look up, I don't see a ceiling. I just see opportunity, and I just want to go see how high I can climb. And I might slip off here and there, and I'll dust myself up and get back on the horse, so to speak, and try to climb again. So that was a really refreshing kind of take on that. So I'm certainly thrilled to see that. So now let's get into our final segment to get into the stretch run here, which is all about contrarian takes and the future of partnerships, right? And so the first question is somewhat related to the last one, which is around open API mindset. Right, so I'm curious, what's your take on open ecosystem versus closed platform, and where should companies think about drawing the line between control and collaboration? Right, because it's lazy to some extent to say everyone should just be open, right? And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't necessarily always work. So what's your take on open versus closed, and how should companies think about drawing the line between control and collaboration?
Yeah, my take is that as long as you're a responsible company that is handling customer data to the utmost highest standards, and you have a responsibility to the data that you're handling and the customers that are trusting you with their business, your ecosystem should always be open. Frankly, and this goes back to what we were discussing earlier, I think that when you advocate for a closed ecosystem or when you advocate for a lack of collaboration, you are showing, as a company, you are showing up with the intentions of I am better and I will, continue pushing my product and I will continue winning. Whereas in reality, we are in an ecosystem, for a lack of a better word, where you have to collaborate, you have to share what's best from each other, and you have to really prove that you care about the customer and not just about your own profits. So really when I'm evaluating a new partner and the first thing that I get from them is, oh, you have to pay this much for our API, or, sign this API agreement and this is how much you have to pay per call, it always is a little bit of a red flag. Of course, yeah, I'm like, okay, well, are you really interested in building a partnership that is mutually beneficial, or are you just trying to squeeze whatever money you can from people that want to join your platform instead of actually building something that is valuable? So yeah, my take is, while I agree with you that it can't just be like, yay, open, everybody have fun, I do think that the intention when you are building a product or a company should always be to think that you want to have an open ecosystem in order to serve your customers.
Yeah, very well stated, and I agree on the point around, when a partner, kind of a prospective would-be partner, starts off the conversation that way. To me, it just reeks of desperation. And to me, it's not always this case, but to me, it reeks of like, you don't believe in the value your product can deliver, right? Because it's like, why are you, that's like any company in sales where they like try to get all of the money up front versus like a more traditional modern model now, pay per use or even pay per ROI, right? Which is like a huge model nowadays. So to me, it just reeks of kind of desperation, which is not something I jive with. But on the other point as well is, especially nowadays, where like data is king, queen, and everything else, right? Like you need to be more open than ever because we're increasingly moving towards like headless surfaces, right? Like, all of these surfaces are collapsing, so to speak. And so you want like to really add value into your customer ecosystem, you need to be easily connected and plugged into all of the other tools they use, because that's consumer expectation, which is a big part earlier. Like every company and individual who works within these companies that uses these software tools, we are increasingly assuming one-click connection everywhere you go. Every permutation you can imagine, bi-directionally. Like if I'm in ChatGPT and I want to like sync into HubSpot or Slack and vice versa, we're just assuming everything's interconnected, which is another reason I believe you really need to be open platform as much as you can, because otherwise, how are you going to compete with all the other MCPs and other things of the world? Does that resonate?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, what you just said about like Slack and ChatGPT and likely Gmail or Granola, like think about the value that you get as a user when these platforms talk to each other versus when they don't. You're actually doing extra work to use the value from one platform and translate it into another one. So that kind of defeats the purpose of having a great platform if you can't amplify what it's doing. So yeah, to me, it really is all about ensuring that whoever is using your product or your service remains top of mind, remains priority. Like as a company, I really do think you have a responsibility to serve in a way that is responsible and in a way that increases value, and not just in a way that is like, how can I, penny pinch here and there from this agreement or this API fee or this feature. And I think that, an open ecosystem really promotes just better services for everybody. So, I mean,
well
welcome
said.
to my TED Talk. I sound very passionate about this. I'm starting to realize, but I think I've seen the difference when it's not like this, and it actually doesn't help everybody. So
Absolutely. I mean, I won't get into this, but one of the funniest things I saw when it all happened was with like Elon Musk's like lawsuit against OpenAI, and he just started calling them closed AI. So like that was just like a hilarious saga. But this isn't the place. We don't have the time to get into that. So that's a good point.
yeah, we do love viral tweets, so it's fine.
Absolutely. Cool. Next kind of hot topic, so to speak, is this is a myth to bust, which is many people in GTM world, especially in the sales world, think partnerships is easier than sales, or all we're doing is spiffing folks and hugs and chugs at these events, and we're all just having these drinks. And I'm curious, like, why do you think these myths are harmful, and how do you personally approach kind of educating non-partnership stakeholders on what partnerships is and why it really is important? Because there's definitely a stigma out there, especially with sales. We just did this huge survey. The average relationship between sales and partnerships departments is like 2.9 out of 5, which I don't think that's great. And it's crazy because like we have like the same quota KPI models for the most part. And so, I would love to just get your take on kind of why you think this rhetoric can be harmful, and what do you personally do to try to overcome that?
I think we need a full podcast just to talk about the difference between partnerships and sales, and also where they're the same. But I think this myth is harmful in both ways. The first one is harmful for people that are in sales or customer success and want to get into partnerships, to think that this is an easier industry, or to think that they're going to work less because the quotas are different and because all we do is go to happy hours and put together cute slides. That's harmful because you have no idea what you're signing up yourself for. If you think that this is going to be easier, it might actually backfire and hurt your career and hurt what you really want to do with your time if your perception of partnerships is that you're not going to have the same pressure or the same stress. I would argue is the opposite. But it's also harmful for people that are in partnerships, sort of, and what we discussed earlier, kind of like spreading your good and making sure that you have these conversations with leadership to prove that what you're doing makes sense. Because we need as many teams as we can to influence the initiatives that we're doing, and we need these people to be on board, these teams to be on board. So the moment that people start thinking that your job is, just relationship building or going to events or, going on happy hours, you start immediately losing value, and your partnership motion is quite frankly threatened. So I think it's important to understand the differences in partnerships and sales. I don't want to get into the motion of, my job is harder than yours. Not at all. I actually think like being an AE these days is very, very, very difficult. But I just think that it's a completely different motion, and you can transfer your skills, but you will leverage them in different ways. So if you're not in partnerships, you want to get in partnerships, but you have this perception that it's easier, it's harmful because it's not. But if you're in partnerships and somebody is saying that partnerships is just, happy hour and relationship buildings, then that also hurts the whole profession as a whole.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. I think one key point there as well, as we talked about earlier, is being able to educate with impact, right? Like clear impact, like being able to report on the actual metrics and performance KPIs, so to speak, that are most relevant, because that'll get people to shut up pretty quick, right? It's like, okay, hey, sales counterpart, or hey, kind of skeptical marketing leader, so to speak, kind of doubting, casting aspersions on like what we're responsible for. It's like, let me show up to the next leadership meeting and show you what we've been doing over here, right? And probably show you how we've been directly positively impacting all of y'all as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
Money talks, so to speak, but like results and impact speak volumes. So
For
the
sure.
next question for you, just a couple last ones to wrap up. We'd be remiss if we didn't get a prediction from you on AI and its impact, right? So like, I think every podcast interview on Earth right now asks this question. But it's like, look, we know AI and automation are reshaping ecosystems. So how do you personally think partnerships will evolve in the next 3 to 5 years, right? That's a long timeline, but how do you think, if you think of like how partnership operators currently execute and do their jobs and live within these companies, like, is there 1 to 2 particular bets that you have pretty high conviction of, or you're like, you know what, these things we're currently doing, I don't think we'll do anymore, or these things that we don't do yet, we'll probably start to be doing? You can take that in any direction.
I think today, specifically at this moment in time, we're starting to see a little bit of AI fatigue as far as where it's being used and how it's being used and how we relate to it. I think there's a lot of talk and maybe a little bit existential, but I think people really are wondering, like, what is this all for? Like, what is my job? With all, and truthfully, with all the layoffs happening and all the restructurings happening because of AI, it's no wonder that people are wondering, what is this and how is it going to impact me? And I think with that comes a bit of fatigue of, well, AI is not human, and AI is never going to be able to replicate the same things that an in-person experience will. And I actually think partnerships is one of the professions that could leverage AI in the best ways possible, which is just optimizing data, getting your insights clean, using those spreadsheets and sort of like making the VLOOKUP faster, just like ensuring that you're leveraging your tasks and your day-to-day, which is, I think, what we intend to use it for as a whole. But that's where the relationship aspect comes in for partnerships. No AI will ever replace the trust that you can give someone, and also the promise of delivering on a joint product integration or a marketing initiative or a sales campaign. And I think that's where, AI will amplify your day-to-day tasks, and truthfully, like the more boring aspects of the partnership profession, which are all of the reports and all of the slides and talking to leadership and saying these are the metrics that I've hit this quarter and all that stuff. But as far as the relationship building, which is a big foundation of a partnerships profession, I don't think that AI will do much there. So, of course, anything can change. I think we've been seeing that in the last couple of months, but I don't think that AI will impact the partnerships profession the same way that we have seen it impact others.
I tend to agree with mostly everything you said, and I think like a lot of the monotonous, boring stuff is going to get largely automated. I think there's just going to be a lag for like companies to get it right, and then to enable their employees to get it right. Like, you can give people the tools. I can't remember. I just read a report today from Canva. Their like chief customer or some chief people officer publishes a very honest account of like, hey, we gave our entire company a week off to leverage AI, and it was very disappointing. Like, you can give all of these, and they kind of compared it to like, imagine we went back 10,000 years and gave technology that we have now to like our ancestors, so to speak. They wouldn't know what the hell to do with it, right? So that's a whole other conversation. But
I do agree that the way that any single person approaches their job and the way that any single person uses AI is also tightly correlated with how it's been positioned from a leadership perspective or from a higher up perspective. So, right now I'm lucky to be wanting to use AI because it's being given to us in a way that is like, look, amplify your skills, amplify your magic, get creative, work smarter, rather than, oh, why don't you just ask, this AI platform and then give me back a summary, which is outright disrespectful. So I think that the way that you position AI within your company and you enable your employees and your teams to approach it and understand it will ultimately determine whether it is valuable or whether it's just something that doesn't really move the needle.
Amazing. Cool. Well, look, we are at time. This was absolutely fantastic conversation. The last question for you, Daniela, is we just spent 50 good minutes together. What's one thing you hope our audience takes away from this interview?
Man, I've had a blast, by the way, in this 50 minutes. But I think, well, I feel like I hammered it with the open ecosystem, so I probably won't go too deep into that. But I do think that keeping the customer experience a priority when you're in partnerships, whether that is an integration partner or influencer partner, value-added reseller partner, whatever type of relationship you're owning and you're handling in your company or with your own business, I think as long as you understand who you're selling to and how they're going to use what you're building, I think you're in a really good place. I guess maybe I can also close up with a mistake or a playbook that I wouldn't run again, and I think it relates to what you mentioned earlier too, Chris, which is building an integration purely because your competitors have it or purely because you think it would add value. Like what you think is really important, but look at the data and then justify whether that actually makes sense. So too long didn't read. Always prioritize your customer, always prioritize your user, and then once you really understand their pain points and where they're spending time that could be saved or money that could be saved, that's where you have something that is really valuable.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that. Look, only good things can happen when you can materially impact and improve the quality of the life, so to speak, of your ICP customer. And I'm very intentional with that. Like if you have 10,000 customers, guess what? Not all of them are that important. And that may be contrarian to say, but like who is your ICP? If you can move the needle on those accounts, it'll move mountains, it'll open up doors for you, and it will eventually trickle up to improving top line acquisition, right? If you can help add value to your existing customer base, even if you're not technically comped in gold on that, don't worry. You'll be able to like reverse engineer that into a way that helps you acquire new customers, market and sell to them, and then you're just totally indispensable. So cool.
Fully agree. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this, Danielle. I cannot wait to get this episode live. We'll share your profile for everybody to connect with you. Thanks so much, Danielle.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
All right. Until next time, be sure to like and subscribe if you like what you listened to today. We'll see you next time.